Oh, hey, what's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. Danilo Caprick here, aka the best dressed man in tech sales. Don't forget it. And in today's video, I'm really excited to break down a very special topic, which is what is the #1 communication hack that you can start using to immediately make your conversations more interesting, less boring, and set yourself apart from almost anybody else they speak with. So, without further ado, let's get into it. So before we get into this specific communication hack, we need to first address why is this even important? Why is it important that we sound interesting? Why is it important that we stop having boring conversations? And why is it important to stand out in a business or social conversation in general? The reason this stuff is important is because whether you like to admit this or not, we are all in competition with one another. When it comes to our family scenario, we are all competing for the love, attention, and energy of our family. When it comes to social circles, we are all competing for the love, attention, and energy of our friends. And when it comes to the business world and our professional lives, we are all competing in the marketplace to beat our competitors. So the better that we can do at standing out, being more interesting, being less boring, we not only make it more enjoyable for the people around us, but we increase our own likelihood of success. The communication hack that we want to convey to you in this video today is all about using uncommon language to ask and answer common questions. Think about that for a second. I'm gonna say it again because it's worth repeating. Using uncommon language to answer and ask uncommon questions. Let me go ahead and break this down so it makes sense. So first, let's break down some of the most common questions that we hear throughout our lives. These are things we hear every day, and these phrases are said millions of times across the globe every single day. So what are some of the common questions that I might be referring to? I'm talking about the questions that we use every day that you hear hundreds of times, and these phrases are unfortunately used millions of times every day around the entire globe. They are, for example, what do you do? Right? How many times someone asks you that? Or, what do you do for fun? How many times somebody asks you that? How are you? Probably hear that 50 times a day. What else? How have you been? Hear that all the time. And last but not least, what have you been up to, right? So these are examples of some of the common questions that people in society ask all the time. And here's the thing, when people ask those questions, what they get is a very inauthentic, boring, vague response. Why? Because I'll tell you exactly why. The reason questions like this produce really lackluster and insignificant responses is because they don't involve a lot of thinking, okay? There's a book out there called Thinking Fast and Thinking Slow by Daniel Kahneman, Nobel Peace Prize winner, and he talks about this mode 1 and mode 2 thinking. Mode 1 is all about autopilot. Really, like think about when you're driving to your place of work, you've driven there 100 times, you don't even have to think, you just know where to go, you don't even have to make active decisions, you just get there, right? If you're making your favorite dish that you've made 100 times, you don't even have to think about when to put in the right ingredients, you just do it, you're on autopilot. Now, mode 2 thinking, if somebody puts a complex math problem in front of you, you're gonna have to involve this mode 2 thinking where you have to actually put in significant mental effort, okay? And that's what we wanna stimulate by asking uncommon questions or using uncommon language to ask common questions. Because by doing so, we can stop the person from going on autopilot and pumping out some vague, annoying, lackluster response and actually get them to think a little bit, which will not only stimulate their brain, but produce a very interesting response on our end that we can work with and enhance the conversation. Let's think about one of the most common questions that everyone in society uses, like, how are you, right? Anytime you get on a phone call with someone, you meet somebody in person, you jump on a Zoom call with somebody, what do they say? Oh, how are you? And let's step back for a second and ask ourselves, like, what does that really mean? How are you? And do people really care? How are you these days? I would actually say they don't care how you are. And back off for a sec before you think I'm a terrible person. It's not that people don't care how somebody is, it's just that that's the wrong question. You see, it's the wrong question because humans, we care about two things. We care about how we can impact others, right? And then we care about how others can impact us, okay? Let that sink in for a second. And if you take a step back for a second, this whole impact theory makes a lot of sense, right? What do humans love to do? We love to impact people positively, right? If you ask somebody who doesn't really know exactly what they want to do, what do they most often say? They say, I want to help other people. Help is just another word for impact, right? We want to positively impact people around us. We want to positively impact our family. We want to positively impact our friends. We want to positively impact our career and maybe the company we work for or our own business. So, and our customers, by the way. So if impact is what we really care about, we need to stop asking, how are you? Because that's not going to give us the information we want. And instead, it's just going to pump out a boring, neutral response that is not going to enhance the conversation, and it's just going to make things really boring and awkward. So here are some better questions to ask using uncommon language, and I guarantee if you ask these types of questions instead, you're going to get a much more novel response. It's going to be a lot more interesting conversation, and it's going to be the total opposite of boring. Question number 1. Has anything interesting happened since the last time we spoke? Think about that for a second. Has anything interesting happened since the last time we spoke? The word interesting is immediately gonna force them to scan their mind, go through the filing cabinets in their brain, and pull out the last interesting thing that happened to them that they think is interesting. And what's that going to do for you? That information can potentially impact you, or it might give you the opportunity to impact them. Because let's say, maybe they say, oh, well, I found out about a new investment strategy that I'm gonna be pursuing. Ooh, can you tell me about that? Right? Now they start telling you about this strategy that could impact you. Or if you have experience with this strategy, maybe you could say, you know what, I've done that before, it's not a good strategy. Now you impact them. You see how it works? Another uncommon question you can ask that is similar to how are you, but using different words, is what's been inspiring you lately? If you ask someone what's been inspiring you lately, first of all, they're gonna be like, whoa, no one's asked me that before. And again, it's going to force them to think because it's a new question, all right? It's not just how are you, it's what's been inspiring you lately? And again, they're gonna go through their filing cabinet and they're gonna pull out the last thing that inspired them. And guess what? That might inspire you. Or it might allow you an opportunity to, again, impact them with maybe, hey, I can connect you with a person who actually does that. Or, hey, I actually know a little bit about that. Let me tell you something, right? Whatever it is. But again, this is a nice, uncommon question that will produce a very uncommon answer and a more exciting conversation. Another question you can ask is, what are you really focused on these days? And I like this question because we think back to how are you? What do most people do when you ask them, how are you? They kind of run through their checklist of life. They'll be like, oh, well, you know, work's good, family's good, this is good, I just got a new car, I got some travel coming up. They kind of run through the checklist of their life with family, finances, health, all that stuff, right? So instead, you can just say, what have you been focused on lately? And what they'll probably do is pick one of those life categories and give you the update that's most significant. For example, they might say, well, I've been really focused on my fitness routine lately, and I actually hired a personal trainer, and we're targeting these 4 muscle groups, doing these specific exercises 5 times a week. And now all of a sudden you're like, whoa, you have a lot more to work with and have a more meaningful response in that conversation as opposed to someone just saying, oh yeah, I've been hitting the gym lately. Another version of that question that we can ask is, what or where are you putting your time, effort, and energy into these days? And when you think about that for a second, where or what are you putting your time, effort, and energy into these days? Our time, our effort, our energy are probably the most 3 important attributes that we arguably have as human beings. Our time is super valuable. Our effort is basically where we spend our time. And our energy is our gas, right? Our gasoline that keeps us going, our fuel. So if you ask somebody, where are you putting all that these days? It's gonna really make them stop for a second and say, where have I been putting it? And again, it's gonna involve a lot more thinking on their end, which is going to produce a new, meaningful response and give you, as the participant in the conversation, a lot more meat, a lot more raw material to work with and produce a more meaningful response. So at this point, I want to do a quick little recap because we talked about a lot of things, but this is the hack, you guys. This is what we call using uncommon language to answer and ask common questions. And the whole point of this is avoiding the vague, generalized, boring responses that we get when we ask questions like, how are you? How have you been? What have you been up to? Right? We want to break the mold a little bit and actually force our participants in the conversation to think a little bit more, which will, believe it or not, make the conversation more enjoyable for them because they're now getting questions that stimulate their brain in a new way because no one has asked them these types of questions before. The other benefits of this approach that we didn't talk about, but I quickly want to introduce in the recap is, number one, this is immediately going to help you sound like nobody else the other person has spoken with. All right, so let's recap some of the main points. I'd say point number one is to avoid the common questions of how are you, how have you been, where have you been, how have you been spending your time? No. All right, point number one that we went through are some of the most common questions that people ask every day that we should actually stop asking, okay? Those questions are, what do you do? What do you do for fun? How are you? How have you been? What have you been up to? We want to stop asking these questions because, again, when we ask these questions, the other person's brain just goes on autopilot. They have a very canned response, and it's going to not give you, as the participant in the conversation, a lot of raw material to work with and produce a meaningful response. What it most often results in is awkwardness and not too many directions to go in, and things just kind of die from there. Instead, we want to just sprinkle in some uncommon language to ask a similar type question. Some of the uncommon language that we can use instead of these questions are, for example, number one, has anything interesting happened since the last time we spoke? Number two, what's been inspiring you lately? Number three, what are you really focused on these days? And number four, where or what are you putting your time, effort, and energy into these days? Asking these types of questions are going to spark the individual's brain because asking questions like this are really going to stimulate the brain of your listener because nobody's asking them questions like this. And guess what? When you have a new stimuli, there's going to be a new response that probably hasn't been said before. So again, this is directly going to result in a more exciting conversation with better answers. And not only is it going to be better for you as the participant, but it's going to be more fun for the listener because, again, they're getting to use their brain and they might even learn something about themselves because they might say something that, again, they just haven't said before because nobody has asked them the question the way that you have asked. There you have it, guys. I hope you enjoyed the content for today. If you did, please hit the subscribe button below. Also, if you're not doing so already, go follow me on LinkedIn. And last but not least, if you are trying to break into tech sales or if you're already in sales and you want to learn how to differentiate yourself from 99% of other sellers in the marketplace, go ahead and check out the B2B Syndicate. See what we got cooking up over there, all right? With that said, guys, hope you have a great one, and I will catch you all in the next video. Take it easy now.